China is expanding global development initiatives throughout the African continent. What does this mean for the future of China-Africa relations? Hello, I'm Arun Naidu. This is The Heat. Over the years, China has developed diplomatic ties with 53 African countries. It has sent medical supplies, helped build infrastructure, and supported economic growth and entrepreneurship as part of its Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing is now looking to promote its global security initiative to enhance stability and peace in the region. To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Nigeria is Charles Onunaiju. He is the director of the Center for China Studies in Nigeria. From South Africa, Grace Johan Wong is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Research on Evaluation, Science and Technology at Stellenbosch University. Here in Washington, D.C. is Robin Renee Sanders. She is the CEO of FEEDS Advocacy Initiative and former U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Congo and Nigeria. And from Beijing, Aina Tangen is a senior fellow at the Tahe Institute. Well, welcome to all of you. And Aina, let me start with you. China has spent almost 3 decades building its relationship with the countries of Africa. And if we look right now, there are very strong economic, trade, political and diplomatic ties between China and these countries in Africa. How would you say the Chinese approach to Africa differs from that of the West? And of course, we have to remember that in many instances, a number of Western countries are the former colonial masters of these countries in Africa.
Well, Africa has suffered through kind of an active neglect period over the last number of years. Donald Trump was not particularly interested in it, and China has been coming with investment, and this is exactly what they want. China is, there's an emotional tie. There's this issue about when China was entering the UN, it was Africa that really kind of carried them over the threshold, and they have been very grateful for that. And as a result, yes. But the big news, of course, is what the banking infrastructure groups can do for Africa and how this can help them as they move forward. There have been a lot of other things, structural building, the party building in terms of these different countries, and also these new security initiatives.
Charles, if we look at one of the practical examples of this cooperation that we see between China and African countries, let's look at the help that China gave to African countries in the battle against the COVID pandemic. China supplied many of these countries with vaccines, with medical equipment, with training as well. How crucial has that help been for Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. They're quite game-changing. Of course, when this broke out, just like every other part of the world, Africa was also caught by surprise with outbreak. And initially, it was thought there wouldn't be much of its impact in Africa. Nobody anticipated the disruptions, especially the socio-economic life, in as much as Africa did not witness so much of its fatalities. But in terms of disruption, it was hugely significant. And of course, there is no doubt that China's timely engagement with Africa in the anti-COVID struggle was very significant. If you remember, it was only China and Africa that held a bilateral summit on anti-COVID solidarity in 2020 at the peak of it, and worked out a roadmap. It was mutually beneficial. And China's timely engagement with supplies of materials and the pledge that when the vaccine is found, it will be made a public good, and Africa will be among the first beneficiaries by President Xi Jinping, all came through. And when it comes to post-pandemic recovery, China also was a very reliable partner, as you would know, in the FOCAC summit of last year in Senegal. President Xi outlined 9 cooperation programs. Among them was 1 billion donation of COVID vaccines, of which 400 will be jointly produced in Africa, and of course, a whole range of support to contain the viciousness of the virus in the continent. But more importantly, a roadmap for recovery, which includes today the establishment of special economic zone to accept African imports, agricultural imports worth up to $300 billion in the next 2 years. This will obviously provide sufficient basis for sustainable recovery from the pandemic disruptions in Africa.
Grace, China's signature foreign development program is the Belt and Road Initiative. And looking at some of the numbers here, when we look at how that program has been implemented in Africa, Chinese companies have built more than 10,000 kilometers of railway, up to 100,000 kilometers of roads, 1,000 bridges, and almost 100 ports. So put that in perspective for us. How important has the Belt and Road Initiative been for Africa?
Well, the Belt and Road Initiative definitely plays a very significant role in the development project in Africa. And I'm actually right now in South Africa. And South Africa, for instance, is the biggest trade partner of China in Africa. And this is also the most attractive country for Chinese investment in Africa as well. So like you just mentioned, China actually invests in Africa in terms of infrastructure, energy, health, education. So there's a different kind of aspects. And the Chinese technology companies and other Chinese companies' investment is just one dimension of this whole China's investment in Africa.
Ambassador Sanders, the China-Africa Cooperation Vision 2035, it's just been published, and it includes 9 programs over different sectors that will be carried out over the next 3 years. What can we expect from this?
I think that the program that's coming out over the next several years from China is probably an enhancement of what they are already doing and adding on to that. They have a robust relationship that's clear. I do want to say that recently I looked at Gallup poll looking at the favorables for the US, China, and Russia in terms of how Africans, based on conversations directly with Africans on the continent, how they feel about all the nations. And certainly I was glad to see that we still have a 60% favorables. China's not too far behind with 52%, and Russia's at 42%. But what that tells me is that all of the things that you just described, which are important and happening on the continent, that the U.S. Definitely needs to step up its involvement in a more consistent manner. We've had this gap for a couple of years here, and I think the new administration is really trying to address that in several ways, in terms of investment, in terms of development financing, in terms of visibility. But most importantly, I think we need to step up our relationship in terms of consistency at the highest levels. Right. And I think we have some examples of that coming up soon.
So what are these examples that you mentioned? I mean, how does the United States step up its involvement? It doesn't have anything like the Belt and Road Initiative, does it?
No, we don't have it. That's not our playbook. I mean, we're not looking at competing with the Belt and Road Initiative, line by line. But certainly one of the things that is on the horizon is the upcoming Africa Leaders in Business Summit. We haven't had one of those since 2014. China, on the other hand, has the Africa Forum every year, and certainly since the late 1990s. We haven't done that. That's the consistency element that I'm talking about. We have to be engaged at the highest level on a consistent basis, regardless of what administration is in place. In addition to that, we have really revamped a lot of our tools, our development tools and our development financing tools, so that we're addressing health, education, working with Africans to look at investment opportunities. We recently signed 2 weeks ago a trade agreement with Kenya. We are also looking at programs that focus on helping small and medium-sized businesses, young people. So I think this administration is doing its best to turn that around. But I think bottom line to your point is we have to have things that are more visible to the everyday African person on the street, which really we haven't done. Some of our programs, no matter how engaged we are, they're just not visible to the average African on the street. And I think those two issues, consistency at the leadership and the people-to-people level, and certainly more visibility to the average African on the street about what we're doing and how engaged we want to be.
Anna Tangen, China recently announced the Global Security Initiative at the China-Africa Peace and Security Forum. And of course, China has always placed a high priority on regional security as well as on creating stability. How does China plan on expanding this to the African continent?
Well, they'll be cooperating. They're providing arms and training to the African Union. They have a number of projects. They've said 10 that they're going to implement. And they say that a lot of this is about training, anti-terror drills, regional security. In truth, though, I think regional security is a little bit more difficult. I don't know exactly what they're going to be able to do about terrorism there. A lot of the things that are pushing these are underlying things. I think the economic things that are much more important over the long run. Obviously, every country has a duty to provide peace and order. But at this point, with the recession coming, possibly a depression, these countries, many of them are going to fall in between the cracks. There's not going to be enough food or energy, and they're really going to suffer. There could be civil unrest, and that's going to be a big issue as we go forward.
Right, Anna, and those points that you mentioned, the fact that there could be a recession coming, and there are issues with food security right now. I mean, a lot of that's been exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine. How can China help?
Well, China has reserves, but in the short run, there's not a lot to do. I mean, you're already seeing reports that India, Europe are going to have very, very poor crop yields because of the massive heat. That's also true in the United States. We have yet to see what the situation will be in Brazil, but these are a lot of the big bread baskets with Russia out, were very difficult to get to, with Ukraine impaired. Food is going to be an issue. I mean, people don't realize that Africa is a big importer. There are a lot of nations who literally have almost 60, 70% of their different food crops in there. One of the issues is fertilizer. That has been interrupted. Without the fertilizer, you get less yield, and that will also impact things. So at this juncture, China needs to help these countries develop their own fertilizer systems and then use those to start generating more crops so they can start feeding themselves, because buying it abroad is going to be very expensive as countries compete for what is remaining.
Okay, and we are going to take a break right now. More of our conversation on China-Africa relations. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.
To know about China. China 24, only on CGTN. 360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. Biz Talk, only on CGTN.
Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing China's international relations on the African continent. Let's get back to our panel right now. And Charles, China and Africa, they already have a number of programs in place that are contributing to the development of the continent. I'm going to look at one of them. This is the AU's Agenda 2063 program. What can you tell us about it?
Yes, I think that is the most important, very important thing between China and Africa. Working in synergy and engaging on a number of questions. Of course, among the key issues in which China and Africa and the AU are cooperating and coordinating, is peace and security in Africa. If you remember, the AU 2063 agenda core priority is silencing the gun, silencing the gun. So peace and security is a core component of the 2063 agenda, and China has very vitally aligned to this position, supporting peace. It has held 2 conferences, 2 meetings with the AU on developing a roadmap for peace and security in Africa, providing support for standby force and providing, working out modalities for engaging in intelligence sharing and other support for peace and security. But more importantly also, providing concrete support for development, because the bulk of the crisis in Africa is on account of development question. Either there is a farmer herdsman clash in Nigeria over land, over grazing fields, shrinking resources, expanding population, more need but shrinking resources. This is at the core of challenge of conflict in Africa. And I think China has robustly engaged in this area of not only supporting in practical terms peace and development mechanism, but also paying attention hugely to questions of development in Africa. Like our colleague from South Africa noted, Belt and Road have become very, very defining in providing Africa the existential need to overcome development gaps and fill the development gaps, which is at the core of most crises and conflict in Africa. We've seen substantial connectivity. Someone just mentioned over 10,000 kilometers of roads. Seaports have been built, power plants, over 80 power plants have been built, and generating Chinese firms are well rooted in Africa, a number of the special economic zones where most of these firms are operating, reducing employment among the young people, transferring technology. Is a whole range of work in progress. So I think the definitive agenda of 2063 as AU roadmap to peaceful, developed, and Africa in peace with herself, especially trading with herself, are also key areas in which China has been engaging Africa. And what I can report is they are work in progress, work in progress.
Okay, Grace, if we look at technology and advancement on the continent, China and Africa, they've constructed 66,000 kilometers of power transmission lines, and these lines are capable of transmitting up to 120,000 megawatts of power generation. There's also a communications network, and then there's a network service covering 700 million user terminals. And if we look at, the future growth globally, I mean, a lot of it is going to be in digital economies. So how important is this for Africa?
Well, Africa is actually trying to play catch-up games in terms of fourth industrial revolution with the rest of the world. So to really develop the digital economy in Africa really is very important, not only to African citizens, but also to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world wants to be connected with people in Africa and companies in Africa. So in terms of the Chinese technology companies, actually there are some telecommunication companies and infrastructure companies like Huawei and ZTE. They are building the digital infrastructures in South Africa and other African countries. So they are, to some extent, contributing to the digital economy development in Africa. And some other Chinese technology companies, for instance, some consumer electronic companies like Xiaomi, Oppo, this kind of Chinese technology companies born in Shenzhen, which is China's Silicon Valley. They are actually helping to fill the mobile devices gap in the African consumer supermarket, so which is also helping the digital economy development in Africa. And last but not least, in terms of the internet platforms, for instance, we all know TikTok, which is a product from the Chinese internet company ByteDance. This kind of a TikTok company are actually helping a lot of African citizens to connect with the rest of the world through internet platforms and social media. So this is another dimension of the digital economy in Africa.
Ambassador Sanders, there are something like 10,000 Chinese companies currently operating on the continent of Africa. And of course, China is also Africa's biggest single trading partner. And in 2021, that trade was valued at $221 billion. But the question is, are these partnerships mutually beneficial?
Yeah, I think that there are certainly some challenges there. You know, one of the things that really very much on the horizon right now is sort of Africa's debt issue, and a lot of that debt really goes to the relationship they have with China. So something that we have encouraged African governments and nations to pay attention to. The non-concessional debt issue is high, and as the potential for the entire world to go into the recession, that issue is going to become even greater than it is today. So it's one of the issues I think that we all have to pay attention to, particularly in terms of the amount of debt that's owed to China at market rates, the non-concessional rates. I do want to go back to sort of the consistency and the ramp up that the U.S., that I see the U.S. is doing. Clearly, we have to play catch up. We have good favorables to do that. And you talked about the AU Agenda 2020. And we are really working in a number of areas. One area that I haven't heard mentioned today, I agree with my colleagues on the panel, it's certainly digital, it's certainly youth, it's certainly infrastructure development, all the key players, but it's also women. Half of the continent, the population is female, and so you have to pay attention to women businesses, women entrepreneurs, on top of young people in the digital space where you have, you know, Facebook and Google and other companies already operating, helping in the training and the learning and the transfer of skills. But certainly paying attention to women, not only the challenges they face on security. The U.S. has, ever since we stood up Africa Command, we've always been involved in helping and supporting our African partners in the security challenges. We're doing that even more robustly as things continue to be even more challenging, you know, not only in the Sahel, but certainly in Southern Africa, in Mozambique, and now a little bit also in Central Africa. So, you know, those things are really key. So it's important to pay attention to not only the infrastructure development that's going on and the debt and all of those things that I've paid attention to, but I do want to leave this message. You know, Africa, I say this quite often, I said it the last time I was on this particular show, you know, Africa is not the chessboard between China and the United States. Africans are developing their own solutions to some of their challenges. We want to be a partner in that, and I think that this administration is trying to turn that corner so that we are.
Anna Tengen, what is your response to the criticism on the debt issue and the challenges that African countries face?
Well, quite frankly, I mean, all the roads, all the rail, all the ports, they didn't materialize by themselves. Neither did the schools or hospitals. If you don't develop, yes, you don't have any debt and your economy goes nowhere. The reason the U.S. can say that they're not a large part of the debt is because they haven't been putting anything in to help these countries do it. So I think it's a little disingenuous. I agree with a lot of what my colleague said about women and development and things like that, and Africa having to do more for itself. But this debt issue is a talk point that the U.S. likes to push when it actually just exposes that the U.S. has not been involved.
Can I just add something on that?
Yeah.
There's a definite definition separating the debt issue here. I was very specific in talking about non-concessional debt. Certainly, you know, we need to catch up in terms of what we're doing on the ground and the visibility. I've said that from the beginning. But on the debt issue, the debt is defined in two ways, concessional and non-concessional. And I'm talking about the high market interest rate, non-concessional debt. Yes, we haven't done the big infrastructure projects like China has. And again, it's not a competition. It's to work with partners and to work with partners in a constructive way. What we have tried to do, of course, is try to do it on a concessional level. And it's, of course, it's going to be a comparison there, but I think it's a fair one to point out the non-concessional aspect of a lot of the debt that China has with Africa that also ties up their natural resources.
Yeah. Charles, I want to get back to the other point that the ambassador mentioned, and that was the deployment of the Africa Command. That's the United States Africa Command, which is on the continent of Africa. How do African countries see that?
Well, I think, of course, it is U.S. concern with security issues in Africa overlooks the critical factor of development, which is seen by most Africans as the core, as the most critical and important element in peace and security in Africa. And we would like to see more in this area of development. And so far, the U.S. scorecard is not so wonderful. If you remember the AGOA process, it was founded in 2000, and between 2000 and today, not so much has happened with AGOA. Africa has exported less than 60 billion worth of products to the United States. A number of countries have been delisted from the AGOA process under one political pretense or the other. And so far, not up to $60 billion US. Again, the background of nearly more than $100 billion US of exports by African countries to China. And also, not too long recently, we have the Power Africa, the Obama initiative to connect to 600 million homes in Africa. It hasn't come to anything very tangible. We would want to see something more tangible. We believe the challenge of security in Africa is fundamentally development. So we think United States, as a traditional partner, should key into the critical challenge of development in Africa.
Right. Grace, of course, China has built a very strong presence on the African continent, and that presence has not escaped the attention of the West. I mean, if we look at countries like France, a former colonial power in Africa, we had President Emmanuel Macron recently toured part of the continent, and we know that at this stage, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, as well as the UN ambassador, the U.S. UN ambassador, planning visits to the continent as well. Are we seeing something of a battle for influence here?
We definitely see Africa has become a battleground for a lot of powers around the world. So I would say China's role in Africa right now is a little bit different from what some colleagues mentioned, like America's approach or France's approach, because I think China has taken a very cautious approach in Africa right now, and this is shifting its focus from the only government's initiative or government corporations to a multilateral institutions approach. So that's why we see a lot of actually Chinese companies and Chinese technology companies' influence and the presence in Africa. So I think some countries, like you mentioned, the United States and France, I think they still have to play catch up in terms of that aspect.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And that is where we have to leave it. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.